It's time for the CyberSecurity News Byte with Jim Guckin.
CyberSecurity News Byte, episode number 52, for April 3rd, 2023. Impersonating ransomware gangs for extortion. Dish slapped with multiple lawsuits after ransomware cyber attack. Lazarus group linked to 3CX supply chain attack. And Ukrainian hacktivists trick Russian military wives for personal information. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I am Jim Guckin, the host of this show, giving you the information you need to understand the cyber world around us. So this week, a very interesting kind of first story. Actually, a lot of these stories are very highly interesting for me because, usually sometimes I struggle to get the 4 stories I want to pick and I go between. And this one was one of those weeks, but it was only because there was so much good stuff going on. But we only have time for 4. So the first one is actually a revival of a scam that's been around forever. It's not a new scam in any way, but it preys on people who have been the victims of a cyber attack. Now, as I said, it's not a new scam. It's been around since at least 2019, and pretty much in the end, it's like a fancy social engineering scam. Now, the group is calling themselves Midnight, and they are targeting U.S. companies since around the 16th of March. So fairly new kind of attack going on here. And what their goal is they're impersonating other ransomware gangs post-exploit, meaning something's already happened to you. You probably already paid to remediate it, whatever the case is. They know you've been hit and now they're going to go after you. And so they're targeting people who've been previously been victims of ransomware. And they're claiming, hey, look, we have some data and you're going to pay us to be it. Now, it's kind of weird because this gang just doesn't stand on their own. Even though we know the name Midnight, they pretend to be gangs who actually did the ransomware initially. We've seen that in a couple of emails that they've put out. Now, they also threaten to add to their own level of this is you pay me or you will get a denial of service attack, a distributed denial of service attack on your environment. And what we've seen is, in general, they have been able to pull off some low level distributed denial of service attacks. Nothing really changing for most organizations. Now, they do this and they kind of threaten like, hey, that was a small one, pay us, or they're going to keep getting bigger. Now, there has been, at this point, no evidence of them being able to do any bigger. They do, I guess, just enough that it tricks you into believing that they have the resources to make this worse, that they have the resources to continue to escalate this. But so far, we've not seen any kind of evidence that they've been able to do this. So I think, it's pretty interesting because in 2 examples I've seen of them, it's a very confused message. So in one of the examples, they emailed an employee of a holding company in the petroleum additives industry. Now, they claimed to be part of the silent ransomware group, the SRG, which is also known as Luna Moth, which is a splinter of the Conti syndicate. Conti was that big ransomware that was big for the last couple of years. And the Conti gang is obviously focused on stealing data from their victims and extorting them. So kind of falls into the way this pretend group works. Is they've mimicked a group who kind of does the same thing. Now, but the big thing is the subject line of the email mentions a whole nother threat actor called the Certer ransomware group, who've been around since 2021, and they encrypt company networks. Kind of a big thing that they do. So it's kind of interesting to watch this group kind of work their way around, because they're not necessarily doing it themselves. They're pretending to be someone else. And in this example, they emailed the second example is where this happened. So in the second example, They claim that they were the designers or authors of the original data breach. They stole 600 gigabytes of extensive essential data from their servers. But where they failed is they sent it to a senior financial planner who left the organization more than 6 months prior, meaning their data was probably stale from the initial data leak that was out there. So far, there's been no indication that they actually have any of this data or they're able to do any of this stuff. It just seems like they're trying to freak you out, which is why I'm calling it a social engineering attack. They're trying to freak you out into believing that they are bigger than they are, and then get this out of you. So, it's kind of interesting to watch. Now, a group called the Kroll Corporate Investigation and Risk Security the Kroll Corporate Investigation and Risk Consulting Firm, that was a mouthful, started noticing these upticks around March 23rd. So really short time ago. And I'm quoting them exactly because I think that they put it so succinctly in this. And their exact quote on this is, "This method is cheap and easy, conducted by low-skilled attackers. Much like the 419 wire fraud scam, the scam relies on social engineering to extort the victims by placing pressure on the victim to pay before the deadline. We expect this trend to continue indefinitely due to its cost effectiveness and ability to continue to generate revenue for cybercriminals." And this is why you have to kind of understand the criminal mindset when it comes to this stuff, which is it almost costs nothing for them to do. There's no real initial investment. They're not spending a lot of money getting this running. All they got to do is be aware of an attack, get enough information that they can make you believe it's them, and then kind of force you into that. So it's like spam. Spam costs almost nothing. Fractions of cents to send out. But you only need one person to fall for it to be worthwhile for you. So here they're not spending the money on the tools. They're just shooting emails out like spam, hoping that they can get someone to bite. And if maybe you look like you're interested, they'll, DDoS your system for a very short period of time and go, hey, well, there's more, hoping that you'll fall for it. So be aware of this if you've recently been the victim of as an organization or a business, a victim of a cybersecurity attack that this gang may come through. Use similar language, possibly even use the names of the actual actors to kind of get you to pay. And it's kind of like double dipping for criminals. They can kind of come in and, not do much, but you pay them anyway because you're afraid that they might. So be cautious, especially if you're going to negotiate. Not always a fan of negotiating. I know, though, in the business world, sometimes it's not always clear and cut. So I don't pass judgment on organizations who have done it. But this is what you get. You're never sure if the initial attacker is out of your system. But now you got to worry about, these fake groups coming up behind it, pretending like they were. Now, for our second story this week, I've had the discussion with you all, and I've had it on a couple of different forums, in which the physical damage of a cyber attack is only one part of the fallout from a cyber attack. And, usually as security professionals or IT professionals, we view it in that mindset. Like, oh, a system was damaged, a system was compromised, we have to rebuild it, and we have to take it. Now, I have always said on the show that you need to look outside of that. You have to understand what the reputational damage is going to be. We've talked about a couple of stories on the show to kind of get you in that mindset of what the reputational damage to your organization can be. And because it's been a while since I've had a really good story of that, I wanted to bring this up again because there was a story in the news about Dish Networks, the satellite service provider. I didn't know this, but Dish actually stands for something. I just thought it was like a satellite dish thing, which it's an acronym for Digital Sky Highway. The DI in digital, the S in sky, and the H in highway, Dish. I also didn't know that they own Sling TV and Boost Mobile. Well, they were the victims in February of a cyber attack. It took their websites offline, took their apps offline, having huge network outages. And that's what originally Dish Networks called it. They said, look, we're just having a network outage. Nothing about anything beyond that. Just it happened. And they also, the funny thing was, also hit Boost Mobile. So on February 24th, they were hit. They played it off, at least first, as just a network outage. Nothing to be worried about. Well, here it comes on February 28th in an SEC filing. They confirmed that they were hit with ransomware. And the stock price, once it was found out kind of on that back channel, dropped about 79 cents to about $11.41 a share. So now you might be asking, well, what does this have to do with the topic at hand? Well, the ransomware happened, and this story is nothing about the ransomware. The only thing I'm giving you about the ransomware is just the background story on it. I'm not talking about the attack vector, how they got in, none of that. Because I want to tell you about the reputational damage that's going to be done here. So Dish Networks are being sued in multiple class action lawsuits brought on by 6 different law firms on behalf of the shareholders. They're hoping to recover the losses faced by Dish investors who were adversely affected by this problem that Dish Networks had. And, they said the ransomware incident that was behind the company's multi-day quote-unquote network outage really just overstated, Dish's operational efficiency. Like, they pretended like they were really great, but according to these lawsuits, they overstated that efficiency to operate. And they actually called it deficient cybersecurity and IT infrastructure. And it also said they attempted to conceal the fact that it maintained a deficient cybersecurity and IT infrastructure while overstating its operational efficiency. They were unable to secure their customer data. It was leaving it vulnerable. And this is where the shareholders are swinging back at this organization. And we could go into the cyber attack, but that's not, as I said, not the focus here. It's to draw attention to the things outside when an organization doesn't focus on those fundamentals. And I've talked to these organizations. I've consulted organizations where they do not take security as seriously as they should. And there are different reasons why some people may want to take a risky stance because they're business people. Business is all about risks, and risks is how you make money. That's fine. But when you are a established organization that's supposed to have shareholders, you're beholden to the shareholders, and you should maintain a decent cybersecurity program. Now, I don't know what the state of Dish Network's cybersecurity or IT infrastructure is. I'm sure as these lawsuits continue to go ahead, we might get a peek behind the scenes on what their infrastructure looked like. Some of it will be released, some of it won't. But it'll give us an idea of what it is. But once again, the point is this just shows you another thing you have to think of as a security professional. It's not just, I'm keeping you safe in a black hole and you really can't see it, but you're spending all this money to keep your system safe. This is what it is. There is now a lawsuit because almost an 80-cent drop in the share price due to a cyber attack. And even there, I will say it was handled wrong. You shouldn't call it a network outage when it was a cyber attack. I know executives want to avoid that like the plague, but when it is eventually found out to be a cyber attack, like you had to file an SEC filing, people are going to read that. People are going to find out what happens, especially after a multi-day, outage where your websites were down, where people couldn't pay bills. It's where we're at now, and this is just what you're gonna have to deal with. But this is the damage they will have. It'll take a couple years for them to recover on this, and we'll see how the lawsuits pan out. But it's just one avenue you have to pay to outside of the IT and information security kind of mindset we may have. Now, I will say that as I was reading up on this, the systems, they're still working to get them back online, and they're hoping that the bills that are coming out for March are going to be sent out as a paper version, since they still are having issues getting some of their systems fully back online after this. And we could always, maybe down the line as more information leaks out, we can talk about the, how well were their backups and how quick were they able to recover this stuff? Was there a hot site, a cold site? We'll have to see what comes out of it. But I said, this is just to focus on the other damages that an organization can go through after a cyber attack. For our third story, if you use any kind of security software, just because I've seen so many alerts of it over the past week, you may be aware of the 3CX supply chain attack or hack. And if you're not familiar with it, which I necessarily wasn't, 3CX is a communications tool. It's a VoIP application that's on your computer so that you can make voice over IP phone calls from, just from your computer. You don't need a phone. And they have a Mac OS and a Windows version. And I will keep this high level because I want to talk to how they link this to the Lazarus group and kind of go over who they are again. So what happened was attackers have compromised the build process of this application, meaning somewhere along the line, they were able to sneak malicious code into it. And from what people have been able to find out, around March 22nd, 2023 was probably the time where it was first discovered, give or take a couple days. And it was found on a support chat room, or not just support chat room. God, I'm showing my age. A forum in which they were asking for some support questions. Now, this was tracked as CVE 2023-29059. And don't feel bad if you didn't catch that. You can always rewind it or go to our website to get the show notes that has the CVE listed in there. As of the time I've recorded this, I haven't found a CVSS score for it. So check back and see how bad that may be. Now, I want to say this is only impacting, or you should only have to be aware of this if you are using the self-hosted version of this software. If you are using it in the cloud, they already patched it. You don't have to worry about it. But if you are using a self-hosted version, make sure you are looking for, if you're Windows-based, the application version 18.12.407 or 18.12.416. They are the impacted versions for Windows. If you have a Mac OS, look for 18.11.1213, 18.12.402, or 18.12.416. Those are the impacted versions. Regardless of whatever you have, you want the good version starts at 18.12.422 and greater. That's where you want to be. So make sure if you have any version before that, you start to update it so that it doesn't have this kind of ransomware in the background. And if you have these in your environment and you're a security professional, do a little bit of research because the tactics used by these impacted versions are different between Windows and Mac. The Windows version reaches out to a GitHub where it gets an ISO. The Mac OS version does something a little differently. So let's talk about how they figured out who it was. So I've seen the security group Velexity, Sophos, and CrowdStrike all agree that it's Lazarus. Now, I will say CrowdStrike does identify the threat actor a little different. They call them Labyrinth Cholima, but that is their name for Lazarus. So you have three big groups who are making this distinction, saying, look, this is definitely Lazarus. We analyze some of the tools they use in the attack, and we know who it is. And I find it interesting because the reasoning was they looked at the shell code sequence that runs on both these versions, and the shell code is used in a loader file called Iconic or a malware called Applejuice, Jeus. And those two pieces of software are already highly linked back to Lazarus. So it's just kind of interesting when we have to look at this that, someone has sat there and pulled apart so many software that they're able to identify coding techniques used by these, hacking groups to be able to attribute stuff. And sometimes, very rarely in cybersecurity, do you get an easy attribution. You may be suspecting of something. You may think a group is doing it. You may kind of have a good idea. But sometimes it's not hard to say 100% certainty a group is the one behind these attacks. And Lazarus, as I said, is a North Korean state-sponsored group. The government backs them, gives them whatever they need, the training and so forth. They've been around for over a decade at this point, since 2009. They like to hit financial sectors and make money. But, a lot of groups use the same tactics over and over again, which makes it easy to identify and block some of their attacks. Where Lazarus, I will give them, they are quickly changing from one tactic to another, to different tools, whatever they need to get the thing done. So they are very highly adaptable. And, I said, I just love the idea of a clean attribution, because in cybersecurity, we often don't get that. We may have our theories, our ideas, a hunch, but having someone really narrow it down to an attack is interesting. The hack and how they got into the process, I'm sure as the information comes out, will be more and more fascinating. But we have to kind of look for these. This is the second big kind of supply chain attack out there, and I'm guaranteeing it's not going to be the last. If you can get your malware in there and hidden enough, and once again, Apple, they check the software that they allow in their systems. These guys were clever, and only afterwards was it noticed. And that's kind of where the skill comes in from these groups. But it goes to show you, we always have to be aware of the supply chain being attacked, and eventually getting to, you or your business, and not even knowing about it. And you trust it, because we always, as security people, we're always trained to make sure the newest version is safe. And here you go, the newest version at a time was actually making your networks more insecure. For our final story this week, I mentioned this as an interesting one, only because it has something to do with showing people how effective a social engineering attack can be, and how you can use it to get information that may not be necessarily damaging you think about it at first. So to talk about this, we're talking about the cyber resistance, which are also known as the Ukrainian Cyber Alliance. And the simple trick they did was social engineer wives of Russian soldiers, one in particular, to hack, information about the soldiers. So, it sets up a very interesting story. Now, not everything they do am I totally cool with, but it's war, and, it wouldn't be a choice I would make, but I can't really say, it's bad for them, because I have no place in the Ukrainian-Russian war. But it's a very interesting story about how they got all the information they needed. Now, the main target of their attack was a Russian colonel by the name of Sergei Valeryich Artishenko. Sorry if I'm butchering the name. Who came to fame in the bombing of a civilian-packed theater in Mariupol in March of last year. I'm sure if the name doesn't ring a bell, the theater that people were in, and it had a big, if I remember correctly, had a big paint on the outside saying civilians only, whatever, and it was bombed. And it was a big thing in the news during the beginning of the war. Now, that's their target, which is Sergei. But what they do is they email and convince his wife to do a photo shoot, and they want them to wear their husband's uniform jacket. They're saying it's, look, it's for a pinup calendar. It's to increase the morale of the Russian army. And, I work for your husband's regiment. Can you reach out to 12 other military wives? We're going to get this pinup calendar. It's going to be, huge for the war effort. And, it doesn't seem, if you're thinking about a trying to get information out of you, that doesn't seem like anything bad. We want pictures of you just wearing your husband's uniform jacket. And hey, if you have 12 other military wives, bring them along too. So the wives did take the photos in the uniform of their husbands, And this is where it starts getting crazy. This gave the Ukrainian hacktivists enough information to track down the personal details of their husbands. They were also able to cross-reference this with COVID-19 vaccination records to locate the colonel's home, his duty station, and other details, as well as all the information from the other 12 wives who were there. They hacked the Russian the Russian Ministry of Defense website to hack email and get details on his salary. They got almost all details you could want from the Russian Ministry of Defense information, like date of birth, address, phone numbers. And what they did was they took all this and they published the photos and images of his official documents and his residence. But, they didn't just target him. They went after his wife as well. They hacked and shared her private data, including her phone number, passports, birth date, email. They apparently had nude and near nude photos of her. They published 2 of the more decent photos of her in lingerie. They, with access to this colonel's email, they found performance evaluation, list of pilots, records of officers, bulletins, memos, theoretical and practical calculations. They had this treasure trove of information, all from a simple, can you take a photo wearing your husband's military top? Not like, doesn't have to be like, inappropriate. Like, the women are dressed as they normally would, and they just have the uniform coat of their husbands over it, and they're able to identify information about them from these coats that they're able to use in conjunction with other information they were already being able to find, like the COVID-19 stuff, and utilize as an attack. It's almost amazing. And I've said 100 times, the people who are able to social engineer, I give it to you. You just have a skill to be able to pivot many sources of data into something that's able to be used as a weapon. There are coders out there, I get it, but social engineering for me is always one of these things that you just have to be so aware of yourself to be able to pull this off and piece together separate pieces of information into one, meaningful profile that you're able to use. Now, it doesn't say how they hacked the Russian Ministry of Defense website. I'm assuming it was some personal information they were able to find and be able to, make that into some kind of password they were able to use. But it goes to show you, kind of funny if you think about it, we're in this era of technology and being able to pass orders and instructions and all this stuff through, the internet. And all it takes is a bad password to really show you the downside of it. These Ukrainian hacktivists or hackers, whatever you want to call them, got all this from an email. It's amazing. As I said, going after the wife, I'm not necessarily on board with that personally, but I'm nowhere to say that it was bad or good in this scenario. But it's genius. I'll give it that. It's when I first read, tricking military wives for personal information, I would have never guessed it was just, hey, your husband's fancy uniform coat with all the medals and so forth there, could lead to something along this line. So it goes to show you, doesn't matter how sensitive you think a piece of information is, in the right hands, it could start the path to bring you down or bring an organization down. So remember that. Remember, always kind of practice operational security, because this should show you that it can quickly spiral out of control. I want to thank you once again for listening to the show. Don't forget to check out our website, cybersecurity.newsbyte.com, where you can find all the show notes about this, as well as the articles that we link to get the stories, so that you're able to, do some research on your own. It's all available at CyberSecurity Newsbyte, BYTE.com. And then you can find all of our past shows on there and all the information about the shows. If you're interested in me, you can always check out my website, jimguckin.com. That's GUCKIN.com. And there has a whole bunch of information about me. If you want to reach out, feel free to reach out to me. Any news stories you want to talk, Emmy at jimguckin.com. And I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. But as always, make sure you're taking these stories in. You're figuring out how to best to defend yourself. And don't forget to stay safe online. And we'll talk again next week.
You've been listening to the Cybersecurity News Byte with Jim Guckin. Learn more about our show at cybersecurity.newsbyte.com.